The morning the HOA letter hit my doorstep, the sky over the cul-de-sac was so clear it practically mocked me. My solar panels gleamed across the roof, soaking in light like lazy cats on a windowsill. I had installed them 6 months ago, after 2 summers of brownouts and outrageous energy bills, and I'll admit, watching my meter spin backward gave me a certain petty thrill. The HOA, naturally, didn't share my enthusiasm. The envelope was thick, stamped with "Notice of Violation" in all caps, and it smelled faintly of printer ink and self-importance. According to the letter, my panels disrupted the neighborhood aesthetic and potentially violated reflective surface guidelines. Never mind that 3 other houses had metal roofs brighter than mine, or that the HOA's own clubhouse had solar panels hidden behind its sign. No, my panels were a personal affront to suburban uniformity. I stood in my driveway, holding the letter like it might catch fire, and muttered, "So that's how they want to play it." My neighbor across the street, Mrs. Jensen, peeked through her blinds again. I waved the letter at her, and she vanished like a ghost. That evening, I walked over to the HOA office, a converted garage behind the president's house. The president, Marcia, a woman in her mid-50s with perfect hair and a perpetual air of moral superiority, was hosting an informal board review. Translation: she wanted to lecture me in front of her friends. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice crisp enough to slice bread, "we've received multiple complaints about the glare from your panels. They violate community harmony." "Community harmony," I repeated. "You mean, me generating my own clean power is upsetting the HOA's mood lighting?" One of the board members snorted before Marcia shot him a death glare. "This isn't a joke, Mr. Cole. You're expected to comply within 14 days or face fines." "How much?" I asked. $50 per day after the deadline. "Sounds like you're the one trying to generate energy, money energy." Her jaw tightened. "The rules are clear." I leaned forward just enough to make her blink. "Marcia, the rules are outdated. They were written before solar tech even existed." Her lips curved into a slow smile that never reached her eyes. "Then perhaps you should have requested permission before installation. Ignorance of policy isn't an excuse." Permission. From a woman who once fined a neighbor for painting their fence the wrong shade of beige. Sure. When I left, the air smelled faintly of lawn fertilizer and fake civility. I'd dealt with enough bureaucrats to know that reason wouldn't win here. So I decided to play a longer game, quiet, calculated, and just inconvenient enough to make her regret picking this fight. Over the next week, I filed a counterclaim citing the state's Renewable Energy Protection Act. It basically said HOAs couldn't ban solar panels unless they presented a legitimate safety risk. Marcia's aesthetic discomfort didn't qualify. Still, she doubled down, sending daily notices about non-compliance. I ignored them. My wife, Erin, thought I was pushing my luck. "You're poking a hornet's nest," she warned one night over dinner. "Maybe," I said, "but sometimes you need to stir the hive to find the queen." She rolled her eyes. "And what happens when they sting?" "Then I'll build a bigger hive." Marcia escalated by showing up on my property with a clipboard, taking pictures without permission. I caught her crouching near the meter box like she was conducting a crime scene investigation. "Need something?" I asked from the porch. She straightened, cheeks pink. "Just documenting evidence." "Of what, my sunlight?" "You're being uncooperative, Mr. Cole. The board will not tolerate defiance. And I won't tolerate trespassing. You've got 10 seconds to leave before I call the sheriff." She huffed, stomped to her car, and peeled away like a teenager. That night, I posted my story, anonymously, of course, on a local homeowner forum. Turns out, half the neighborhood secretly despised the HOA's power games. Messages flooded in from people fined for mailbox height, flower choice, or hanging the wrong holiday light. Marcia wasn't running a community. She was running a tiny dictatorship with bylaws. A week later, a storm rolled in, the kind that makes the sky bruise purple before cracking open. Lightning tore through the horizon, and just like that, the entire block went dark. Except for my house. My solar battery kicked in automatically, humming to life like a smug generator. The lights glowed warm and steady. The refrigerator kept running. The AC purred. I stood by the window, watching neighbors step out into the rain, staring at my lit windows like I'd discovered fire. 10 minutes later, there was a knock. I opened the door to find Marcia, drenched, hair plastered to her face. "Our power's out," she said through clenched teeth. "Could we possibly connect to your system temporarily? Just until the grid is restored." I blinked slowly. "You mean, the solar panels you find me for?" Her eyes flickered. "This is an emergency. Surely, you can be reasonable." "Oh, I'm reasonable," I said. "Reasonably cautious about violating HOA bylaws. Wouldn't want to disrupt community harmony." "Mr. Cole, please." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I thought about the letters, the fines, the smug meetings. "Sorry, Marcia. I'd love to help, but my setup's not HOA approved." She stood there, rain soaking her clipboard, lips trembling with fury. Then she turned and stormed off into the dark. By morning, power crews were fixing the lines. Marcia sent out a community email praising residents who stayed calm and cooperative during the outage. No mention, of course, that she'd begged power from the very system she condemned. But the real twist came 3 days later. I got an alert from my monitoring app. Power consumption on my line had spiked overnight. I checked the feed and froze. Someone had tapped into my external junction box, leaching power directly. I followed the cable running along the back fence. It disappeared under Marcia's property line. For a moment I just stared. Then I laughed. Loud, incredulous, almost impressed. "Who does that? How desperate do you have to be to secretly steal the energy you tried to ban?" I unplugged the line, rolled it up neatly, and placed it at her doorstep with a sticky note that read, "Unauthorized usage detected. Please contact your HOA compliance officer." The next morning, she held an emergency meeting accusing unknown vandals of tampering with HOA equipment. I sat in the audience, nodding sympathetically. And as the room buzzed with confusion, I couldn't help but think, this was only the beginning. Because I had plans. Quiet, legal, devastating plans. To make sure the next time Marcia tried to flex her power, she'd discover who really controlled the grid. Now, what's the best way to expose a hypocrite without ever raising your voice? How do you make someone trip over their own rules? And how far would a control freak go before realizing they've lost control entirely? The answers, I knew, were about to light up this neighborhood brighter than any solar panel ever could. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. 2 days after I found that stolen cable, Marcia's husband, Tom, was in my driveway pretending to check property lines. The man had the posture of someone permanently bracing for impact. He gave me a tight smile and said, "Marcia mentioned there's been confusion about the solar setup. We just want to clear things up." "Clear things up?" I repeated. "She stole my power, Tom." His expression flickered. "That's a strong word." "No, Tom. Strong words are trespassing, theft, and tampering with a live electrical system. Want me to pick one?" He sighed, rubbing his temple like he'd been drafted into this war against his will. "Look, man, she just panicked. The outage scared her. Maybe she overreacted. She overreacted by wiring her house into mine like a suburban parasite." He lowered his voice. "Can we make this go away quietly? No need to call authorities." There it was, the HOA philosophy in a sentence. Avoid accountability, bury the mess under manicured lawns. I crossed my arms. "You fix your wiring today, Tom. Then we'll talk about the fines she owes me." That got his attention. "Fines? $50 a day sounds fair, right? Since she likes that number." He didn't argue. He just trudged back across the street, shoulders sagging. I watched him go, realizing for the first time that even the HOA president's husband wasn't immune to her tyranny. That night, Aaron and I sat on the porch with mugs of tea, watching the neighborhood hum with fake calm. Porch lights flicked on, sprinklers hissed, and every motion light was adjusted exactly to HOA regulation height. The illusion of order was almost perfect. "Do you think she'll back off?" Aaron asked. I stared at Marcia's house, its windows glowing like eyes. "No. She'll double down. People like her always do." Sure enough, the next morning, an HOA-wide memo arrived. Subject line: New Energy Compliance Policy. It declared that all residents using solar systems had to submit full schematics for safety verification. Only 2 of us even had solar, me and the retired engineer down the block, Mr. Grant. Grant called me before I even finished reading. "This is nonsense," he barked through the phone. "They can't demand personal system data. It's proprietary." "She's bluffing," I said. "She wants to look like she's in control again." "You think we should ignore it?" "No. We'll comply on our terms." That afternoon, I sent the HOA a 22-page technical report written in the most indecipherable jargon I could muster. Every sentence referenced voltage load, microinverters, and energy coupling coefficient. I even threw in a few fake acronyms. Marcia replied within the hour, "We'll review this with our safety committee." She didn't have a safety committee. I checked. Meanwhile, the whispers around the neighborhood grew louder. People noticed her behavior getting erratic. Early morning patrols, photographing driveways, measuring lawns with a ruler. She fined the Johnsons for unauthorized decorative rocks. She reprimanded a teenager for parking too close to the curb. Every petty act of control seemed to tighten the noose around her credibility. But Marcia didn't just crave authority, she needed it. It was her identity, her armor. Losing control wasn't an option. A week later, she showed up at my house again, this time flanked by 2 board members. All 3 wore matching navy blazers with HOA name tags, like some kind of bureaucratic SWAT team. "Mr. Cole," Marcia began, "after reviewing your report, we've decided your system poses a potential hazard. You're required to shut it down until further inspection." I leaned against the doorframe. "Inspection by who?" "Our appointed energy auditor." "Let me guess," I said. "You." She smiled thinly. "Don't be difficult." I took a long sip of coffee. "Marcia, the State Energy Board certified my setup. You have no jurisdiction." Her voice hardened. "You're a resident under our covenant. If you refuse compliance, the board will pursue legal remedies." Behind her, one of the board members, a nervous guy named Steve, shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should wait for..." Marcia shot him a look so sharp it could slice drywall. "No. We act now." I folded my arms. "Then I'll act too." That night, I filed a formal complaint with the State HOA Oversight Committee and attached every document: her letters, her trespassing photos, the stolen power line. Bureaucrats love paper trails. I gave them miles of it. Days turned into weeks. The tension grew thick enough to taste. Neighbors began avoiding eye contact during trash pickup. The HOA meetings turned into passive-aggressive monologues about civic responsibility. Then came the second storm. This one was worse. Hail, lightning, the kind of wind that makes trees moan. Around midnight, the grid crashed again. But this time, the damage was widespread. Whole sections of the county went dark. My panels kicked in flawlessly. Aaron and I huddled inside, sipping cocoa and listening to the wind howl. The next morning, the neighborhood was chaos. People wandered the streets, cell service down, freezers thawing. And who should show up on my porch but Marcia, again. She didn't even knock this time. She stormed in like she owned the place, dripping rainwater onto the tile. "I need access to your power," she snapped. "The elderly residents can't survive another day without heating." I looked at her, really looked at her. The impeccable hair was gone, replaced by frizzed curls. Her eyes were bloodshot. The perfectionist queen of suburbia was unraveling. "You mean the same power you called unsafe?" I said quietly. "This isn't the time for petty games," she shouted. "People need help. Then maybe you should have supported the panels that could have helped them." Her voice dropped. "Please. Just for one day." Aaron touched my arm. "We can spare a little." I thought about it. Helping her would mean letting her win. Refusing would make me look heartless. So I chose a third option. "Fine," I said. "But it's not for you. It's for the neighbors. You'll publicly acknowledge my system as safe and authorized in the next HOA bulletin." Her nostrils flared. "That's blackmail." "No, Marcia. It's negotiation. You want power? You pay for it with honesty." After a long, trembling silence, she nodded. "Fine." I walked her to the backyard junction. She watched as I ran a line to the communal center's generator input. "This will give enough power for heating and basic lights," I explained. "No charging your personal wine fridge." Her lips pressed into a hard line. "Understood." By sunset, half the neighborhood was powered through my panels. People cheered, thanking me like I'd performed a miracle. Marcia lingered in the background, arms folded, watching her authority melt. But she wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. 2 days later, when county power was restored, I checked my smart meter again, and nearly laughed out loud. My battery logs showed a mysterious data spike during the night the line was connected. Someone had drawn way more power than the community center could possibly use. I cross-checked the timestamp. The excess load began exactly when Marcia had left that night, and ended just before sunrise. I didn't need a detective. She'd stolen my power again, under cover of goodwill. Aaron found me staring at the screen, half amused, half furious. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that she just handed me the rope to hang her with. Because this time, I had proof, data logs, and witnesses who saw her sign off on that connection. The next HOA meeting would be one for the ages. But before then, I had one burning question twisting in my mind. What kind of person keeps digging a hole even when the ground beneath them starts to crack? Was Marcia addicted to control, or terrified of losing it? And when her empire of rules finally crumbled, would she blame me, or the mirror that showed her what she'd become? Either way, the fuse was lit. And I was done playing defense. The HOA meeting was standing room only. Word had spread fast. Everyone knew there'd been solar drama, and half the neighborhood wanted to see who would break first. Marcia sat at the head of the table, chin raised, trying to project control, but her fingers drummed on the gavel like a ticking clock. I arrived a few minutes early, carrying a neat folder under my arm. Aaron stood in the back, quietly supportive. Mr. Grant, the retired engineer, nodded at me from the side row, his expression sharp and expectant. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and tension. "Let's call this meeting to order," Marcia began, her voice tight. "We're here to discuss several issues of community compliance, including energy use and neighborhood integrity." Translation: this was going to be a public execution. She flicked her eyes toward me. "Mr. Cole, you've brought some concerns?" I didn't rush. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make people lean forward. "I have," I said evenly. "Mainly about unauthorized use of private property." A murmur rippled through the room. Marcia's expression didn't move, but her knuckles whitened. "You're implying theft?" "Not implying," I said. "Documenting." I opened the folder and handed copies down the table. Printouts from my solar monitoring app showing energy spikes, timestamps, and connection logs. Here's the draw recorded from my line during the outage. The power routed directly to the HOA Community Center input. Notice the load increase between 11:43 p.m. and 6:12 a.m., which coincides with one residence's surge pattern. Steve, the nervous board member, frowned. "That's pretty specific data." Marcia shot him a look. "This is ridiculous. You can't prove who did anything." I turned another page. "Actually, I can. The HOA authorization form you signed that night lists your name, time, and signature. Your authorization allowed connection to the community center only, not private residences. Yet my logs show extended power consumption consistent with full home usage, roughly 5 kilowatt-hours an hour. That's a lot of lamps for one building, don't you think? The room buzzed. Someone muttered, "She ran her house off his panels?" Marcia slammed the gavel. "Order! These are baseless accusations." "Then let's verify," I said calmly. "The energy company's forensic meter data will confirm it. I already filed a request with the State Oversight Committee." Her mask cracked, just for a second, but it was enough. "You went to the state?" she hissed. "Of course," I said. "Transparency helps harmony, right?" Grant chuckled under his breath. The crowd, once silent, began whispering. A few of the homeowners, people she'd fined for nonsense, looked almost gleeful. "This is slander," Marcia snapped. "You're trying to embarrass me." "No, Marcia. You did that yourself when you plugged into my system after calling it illegal." The gavel hit the table again, this time with a hollow crack. "This meeting is adjourned." But no one moved. People just watched her, realization settling in like fog. Tom, who'd been sitting quietly in the back, finally stood. "Marcia, is it true?" She looked at him like he'd betrayed her. "Tom, stay out of this." He didn't. "I told you to stop making enemies out of neighbors. This is insane." She glared at him, then at me, her eyes glassy with fury. "You think you've won, don't you? You're just some smug little rebel who can't follow rules." "Rules are fine," I said, "until they become weapons." Her voice shook. "You think this community would exist without order? Without people like me holding it together?" I met her stare. "No. It'd probably be happier." The room fell silent. For the first time, she had no comeback. I packed up my folder, nodded to the board, and left. Behind me, people started clapping, soft at first, then louder. I didn't look back. Outside, the night air felt sharp and clean. Aaron met me at the curb, eyes bright. "You handled that perfectly." "Not yet," I said. "There's still one loose wire." The next morning, I found it. Or rather, I found what she'd left behind. A bright yellow extension cord, cut and frayed, lay near my fence, probably yanked loose when she disconnected her illegal line. I coiled it up, labeled it Evidence Exhibit B, and stored it in my garage. By the end of the week, the state committee emailed me. They were investigating the HOA's misuse of authority and unauthorized energy diversion. "Expect follow-up interviews," the message said. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Marcia stopped patrolling after that. Her pristine front yard grew a few weeds. Her once weekly HOA bulletins turned sporadic and defensive. You could smell the shift in power across the neighborhood. People started repainting fences, hanging wind chimes, letting their gardens grow wild again. It felt like spring after a long frost. But calm never lasts in places built on ego. 2 weeks later, a glossy envelope appeared in every mailbox. It wasn't from the HOA, it was from Marcia personally. Inside was a 4-page letter titled, "The Truth About Solar Manipulation." In it, she accused me of weaponizing technology to destabilize the community. She claimed my panels interfered with the neighborhood's electrical grid and caused power fluctuations during the storm. She even suggested my system might be illegally siphoning municipal current. The woman had gone nuclear. I laughed when I read it, but Aaron didn't. "She's trying to turn people against you," she said. "She's trying to survive," I corrected. "This is her last stand." Still, the accusations couldn't go unchallenged. I drafted a point-by-point rebuttal with attached certification documents, inspection records, and an official statement from the Energy Board confirming my system met every legal standard. Then I mailed copies to every resident with a note: "Facts are brighter than fiction." The next HOA meeting was chaos. Homeowners demanded Marcia step down. Someone even brought popcorn. "This has become a circus," she shouted, slamming the gavel so hard it splintered. "You're all turning on me because of one troublemaker." Because you lied, Mr. Grant said, standing. You overstepped your authority, and you can't admit it. Her voice cracked. I built this neighborhood. No, he said calmly. We did. You just handed out fines. When the vote came, it wasn't even close. Marcia was removed as HOA president by a 2/3 majority. She didn't cry, didn't scream, she just sat there, motionless, the reality sinking in. For someone who lived and breathed control, losing it must have felt like suffocating. After the meeting, Tom approached me in the parking lot. She won't take this well, he said quietly. I figured. She's already talking about filing lawsuits. I sighed. Let her try. I've got enough documentation to wallpaper her entire house. He nodded, but there was no relief in his eyes, only exhaustion. She's not evil, you know. Just lost in it. The authority. It became her identity. I get it, I said. But that doesn't excuse hurting everyone else. He hesitated. You think she'll ever stop? I looked toward her car, where she sat gripping the steering wheel like it was the last thread holding her world together. No. People like her don't stop, they implode. And implode she did. A few days later, a city inspector showed up at her property with a warrant. Turns out, someone, anonymous, of course, had filed a report about illegal electrical modifications on her property. I didn't file it, but I might have nudged someone who did. They found spliced wires, unauthorized junctions, even a second breaker panel hidden behind drywall. The city fined her thousands for code violations. By evening, half the neighborhood was watching from their lawns as inspectors carried out bundles of cables like contraband. Marcia stood there in her driveway, pale and trembling, yelling that it was all a misunderstanding. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The universe had already written the punchline. That night, Aaron and I sat on the porch again, watching the quiet return. She's done, Aaron said softly. For now, I replied. But people like her always find another way to claw back control. The question is, how? Because deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Marcia had lost her title, her influence, and her pride. Which meant she'd do anything to reclaim even a sliver of power. And when she did, I planned to be ready. What does a dethroned queen do when the crown still burns her hands? How far can someone fall before they start pulling others down with them? And when the lights go out again, this time for good, whose switch will she flip first? When the HOA's power queen falls, the neighborhood doesn't return to peace, it mutates. For a while, things were quiet. The bulletin board outside the clubhouse stood empty, the usual flood of fines and policy reminders replaced by sunlight and silence. Neighbors actually smiled again. You could hear kids playing basketball after dark without fear of a noise violation. For a community built on uniformity, it was almost human. But quiet in suburbia never lasts. It started subtly. Cars began pulling up in front of Marcia's house at odd hours, short visits, whispered conversations on the porch, papers changing hands. I figured they were lawyers. Aaron said I should ignore it. You've already won, she reminded me. Don't let her drag you back in. She was right, but curiosity is a dangerous drug. A week later, a new envelope arrived. Not from the HOA this time, from the Harmony Energy Alliance. It looked corporate, complete with a logo that suspiciously resembled our HOA's old crest. Inside was a glossy brochure about community-based power initiatives. It promised rebates for residents who joined a shared solar network. At the bottom, in small print, it read, Project Director Marcia 8. I laughed out loud. The woman had reinvented herself as an energy visionary. But there was a catch. The program required residents to route their panels, or power meters, through a central system for optimal efficiency. Translation: she wanted control again, just in a different form. Grant called me that night, fuming. She's turning the HOA into a power company. Correction, I said. She's trying to build an empire from the ashes. We agreed to dig. I traced the company address listed on the brochure. It wasn't an office. It was a rented mailbox at a UPS store 2 towns over. The website was barely functional, filled with stock photos of happy suburban families and meaningless phrases like synergy in sustainability. Still, a few neighbors, mostly those who'd stayed loyal to her, started signing up. She was promising free power credits and lower bills. The irony was almost poetic. One evening, I ran into Tom while walking the dog. He looked worn out, hair grayer than before. "You heard about her new project?" he asked, voice low. "Hard to miss," I said. "You think she's serious?" "She's desperate," he admitted. "She says the HOA wronged her, and this is her way to give back to the community. But she's spending money we don't have. Loans, maybe." "Loans for what?" He hesitated. "New equipment. She bought a bunch of old solar batteries off auction site. Says she'll install them for everyone who signs up." "Does she even know how to do that safely?" He shook his head. "You're asking the wrong question. Does she care?" That's when I realized this wasn't just petty revenge anymore, it was delusion wrapped in ambition. 2 days later, the first installation happened at the end of Maple Drive. I walked by as 3 guys unloaded half-rusted battery units onto a driveway. None of them wore uniforms. One smoked while wiring the units together. Sparks flew. "Hey," I called out. "You licensed for this work?" The man squinted at me. "You the homeowner?" "No, but I'd like to keep the neighborhood from exploding." He snorted. "Talk to the lady in charge. We're just paid to hook it up." And there she was, Marcia herself, standing in the driveway, clipboard in hand, barking instructions like a foreman. When she saw me, her expression froze. "Still snooping, I see," she said. "Still playing engineer, I see." She smiled tightly. "Unlike you, I'm doing something productive. By wiring used lithium batteries together in a suburban garage? That's not productive, that's arson." Her eyes flashed. "You think you're the only one who understands energy? I've done my research. People trust me. Do they know you're not certified to install any of this?" Her chin lifted. "They know I get things done. Something you wouldn't understand." I wanted to argue, but there was no point. She wasn't listening, she was preaching. The next week, strange things started happening. House lights flickering at night. Random power surges. One guy's fridge caught fire. Another's smoke alarm went off at 3 a.m. from no apparent cause. It didn't take a detective to connect the dots. When the fire department showed up after the fridge incident, I overheard one of the inspectors mutter, "These setups are disasters waiting to happen." Marcia's operation went underground after that. She stopped public installations, claiming supply chain delays, but the late-night car visits continued. Then came the night everything blew, literally. It was around 11:30 p.m. Aaron and I were half asleep when a thunderous crack shook the windows. The power blinked, and the air filled with the smell of ozone. I threw on shoes and ran outside. Across the street, one of Marcia's battery banks was burning, a roaring, chemical fire shooting sparks like fireworks. Sirens wailed within minutes. Fire trucks, police, half the neighborhood in pajamas. And there she was again, screaming at the firefighters, claiming someone had sabotaged her system. The chief cut her off. "Ma'am, this is an unlicensed installation using salvaged lithium unit. You're lucky the house didn't go up." She rounded on me the moment she saw me watching. "You," she shrieked. "You did this. You've been jealous from the start." Everyone turned to look. I held up my hands. "Marcia, I was asleep. You're the one building Frankenstein batteries in your garage. You think I don't see what you're doing?" she yelled, tears streaking through soot on her cheeks. "You made me the villain. You poisoned everyone against me." The chief intervened before it escalated further, pulling her aside. While EMTs checked her for burns, Tom just stood there, head in his hands. By morning, photos of the fire were all over the local Facebook group. Comments poured in. Wasn't she banned from HOA stuff? How many people signed up for that program? Is she going to jail? The city's electrical safety department got involved within hours. They shut down every one of her installations. When the inspectors reached my property line, one of them gave me a sympathetic nod. You were right to keep your system isolated, he said. Those setups could have fried your inverter. Marcia disappeared for a few days after that. No one saw her at home. Rumor had it she'd been fined heavily and lost her permits for operating any community project. Then, one morning, I found a note taped to my door. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, precise, looping, full of anger barely contained. You think this is over. You stole everything from me. You'll see what real power looks like. I folded the note carefully, took a photo, and filed a police report. Erin tried to downplay it. She's just angry, she said. She's lashing out. Maybe, I replied. But anger from her usually comes with a fuse attached. Over the next few nights, I upgraded everything: security cameras, motion lights, surge protectors. I even set the system to auto-isolate the batteries if any foreign signal tried to tap in. One evening, the cameras caught her standing at the edge of my driveway, just staring. Motion light flicked on, but she didn't move for a good 10 seconds before walking away. That was when I realized something chilling. She wasn't just obsessed with control anymore, she was obsessed with me. I'd become her symbol of everything she'd lost. And symbols are dangerous because people don't fight them rationally. So I asked myself 3 questions. How far will she go when her empire turns to ashes? What happens when obsession replaces purpose? And what do you do when your enemy stops trying to win and just wants to burn everything down? The answer, I suspected, was coming soon. Because something told me that night by the fire wasn't the end, it was the spark before the explosion. The first sign that Marcia wasn't finished came on a Tuesday morning, one of those false peace days where the sky is bright, the air smells clean, and you start to think maybe, just maybe, the madness is behind you. Erin was making coffee when my phone buzzed with a notification from the security system. Unauthorized access detected. Solar junction panel, rear side. I frowned. Someone's near the batteries. Erin froze. Marcia again? Or a raccoon with an electrical engineering degree? I muttered, grabbing my jacket. I stepped outside. The yard was quiet, dew still glinting on the grass. My solar array stretched along the back fence, humming with that low, steady rhythm that always comforted me. But the junction box cover was open, metal hinges dangling, screws scattered in the dirt. No sign of forced entry, no footprints on the gravel, but I knew better. Someone had been there. I pulled the camera feed. 2 hours earlier, 3:12 a.m., a figure in a dark hoodie, moving slow, careful. She didn't look up once, but the stance was unmistakable. Marcia. She'd been crouched near the wiring for almost 5 minutes before slipping away into the night. She hadn't damaged anything this time. Not yet. Erin called the police, but I knew what they'd say before the words came. No concrete evidence of tampering, no crime committed, keep your property locked. The officer took my statement politely, then left with a sympathetic shrug. Marcia had learned from her previous mistakes. This wasn't about breaking laws anymore. It was about eroding my peace. That afternoon, a new letter showed up. No envelope, no return address, just shoved under the garage door. You can't hide behind your wires forever. The light doesn't belong to you. It was almost poetic, if it weren't also deeply insane. I called Tom. You know what your wife's been up to? A pause. She's not my wife anymore, he said quietly. She moved out last week. Moved out. She's renting a property on the edge of the development. Says she needs space to rebuild her vision. He sighed. She's not the same person, Cole. I don't know what she's planning, but be careful. That warning echoed in my head for days. Then, like a ghost returning with unfinished business, she resurfaced online. A new Facebook group popped up, Community Energy Freedom. Take back the power. The profile picture was a stylized lightning bolt. The admin? M. Harrison. She wasn't even hiding behind a fake name. The posts were wild, rants about corrupt HOAs, solar monopolies, and neighbor surveillance. My name appeared in one of the threads. She claimed I'd hacked her old project, ruined her system, and sold out to corporate utilities. I didn't even bother commenting. That would only feed her fire. But I underestimated how many people in the neighborhood still liked drama more than truth. Within days, her page had hundreds of followers, some curious, some angry, all entertained. She hosted meetings in her new garage, live-streamed like she was leading a movement. Every clip ended the same way: "They can't silence the sun." I wanted to ignore her. Truly. But the first time she accused me of weaponizing energy data and posted screenshots of my home's exterior camera angles, clearly pulled from somewhere private, I realized this was escalating again. Someone had hacked into my network. I spent the next 2 nights digging through my firewall logs. At first, nothing. Then I found a recurring pattern of pings from an unfamiliar device. Masked IP, same timestamp each night, accessing external camera metadata. Whoever it was, they weren't just snooping, they were testing vulnerabilities. I isolated the system, rerouted access, and added 2-factor locks on everything. Still, the thought lingered. If she could get my data, what else could she reach? The next morning, Aaron found a small drone tangled in the hedge by our gate. Its camera light still blinked faintly. I pulled the SD card. Guess what was on it? A clear aerial sweep of our property, zooming in on the solar panels, battery array, even our windows. "Tell me you're not keeping this quiet," Aaron said, voice trembling. "I'm done being quiet." I drove straight to the sheriff's office with the footage, the note, and the drone. The deputy didn't laugh this time. He promised to file an investigation. Still, I could see in his eyes what he wasn't saying: small-town politics, limited manpower, civil disputes that spiral into endless paperwork. That night, for the first time in months, I shut down my panels manually. The hum stopped and the silence was deafening. Erin squeezed my hand. "Maybe we should move," she whispered. I almost agreed, until the lights in the house flickered, just once, before stabilizing again. The power grid was fine. My system was off. So where had that surge come from? I went outside with a flashlight. The cul-de-sac looked normal. But when I turned toward Marcia's rental, something caught my eye, a faint glow pulsing behind her fence. I moved closer, heart pounding. Through the slats, I saw it, a new bank of batteries, freshly installed, humming like a beast breathing in its sleep. She'd built another system. Only this time, she'd linked it to mine. I could see the junction line, thin, almost invisible against the grass, snaking from her side to the edge of my property. The audacity of it made me laugh out loud. She was literally leeching off the setup she'd once tried to destroy. The next day, I didn't call the cop. I called the county energy inspector directly. When the truck rolled up 2 hours later, Marcia came storming out like a hornet in human form. "You had no right to bring them here," she screamed. "They have every right," I said. "You're illegally splicing into private property." Again. The inspector confirmed it within minutes. "This line crosses property boundaries. Unauthorized and unsafe." Marcia's face turned scarlet. "You can't prove I installed it." The inspector pointed at the ground. "Your conduit trench is still wet. You did this yesterday." She turned on me, eyes wild. "You think you've won again, don't you? You love humiliating me." "I don't have to humiliate you, Marcia," I said quietly. "You do that yourself." The inspector handed her a citation and ordered an immediate disconnect. As they packed up, she glared at me with a fury that made the hair on my neck stand up. "You'll regret this," she whispered. I believed her. That evening, I backed up all data from my system, logs, footage, energy records, and stored it offline. I replaced every breaker, reinstalled surge guards, and hired an electrician to triple-check every connection. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't done. And sure enough, 3 nights later, around 1 a.m., the alarms blared again, Voltage surge, inbound connection detected. I ran outside barefoot, flashlight cutting through the dark. There, standing by the fence, was Marcia. Her hair wild, eyes glazed, holding a metal rod like a conductor's baton. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. Her voice was eerily calm. "I'm taking back what you stole. You're about to electrocute yourself." She jabbed the rod toward my inverter panel, sparks crackling. The current arced, flashing blinding white, and then everything went black. When I came to, the yard smelled like burnt ozone. My inverter casing was charred. Marcia was gone. In the distance, I heard sirens again. Erin ran out, screaming my name. By dawn, the police had cordoned off the area. They found her a block away, dazed but alive, rambling about, liberating the grid. She was taken in for psychiatric evaluation. The investigator told me quietly, "She's lucky she didn't die." That setup she touched was live. I stared at the wreckage of my system, half melted, the panels intact but disconnected. The hum was gone again, replaced by the cold buzz of fluorescent lights from the patrol cars. Erin touched my shoulder. "It's over," she said. But I wasn't sure. Because even as they loaded her into the ambulance, Marcia's eyes found mine. She smiled, a small, broken, terrifying smile, and mouthed something I'll never forget. "The power always comes back." 3 questions burned in my mind as the sun rose over the smoldering panels. How do you fight someone who's convinced they're the hero of your destruction? What happens when obsession outlives its cause? And if the light really does come back, what if this time, it isn't hers or mine, but something darker entirely? The neighborhood should have gone back to normal after that night, but normal was a language no one here spoke anymore. For a few weeks, the air was still, no letters, no knocks, no drama. The HOA's emergency bulletin quietly declared Marcia indefinitely suspended from all community involvement. Her house sat dark, curtains drawn, lawn growing wild. People whispered but never lingered near it. The scorch marks on my inverter faded after repairs, and I replaced the melted junction panel with an upgraded system, isolated, tamper-proof, and, for the first time, linked directly to a monitoring network I could control remotely. Erin tried to convince me that the worst had passed. "She's in treatment, Cole," she said one morning, sunlight spilling through the kitchen window. "She's not coming back." "I'll believe it when I see it," I muttered, though a small part of me wanted to. For a few peaceful weeks I almost did. Then the letters started again. Not handwritten this time. Typed. Precise. No return address. Each one printed on plain white paper with the same closing line. "You didn't win. You never will." At first, I thought it was someone copying her style, a neighbor trying to stir trouble, maybe. But the phrasing was too exact, the rhythm too familiar. It was her. Somehow, from wherever she was, hospital, halfway house, who knew, she'd found a way to keep her war alive. Erin begged me to ignore it. "She's looking for attention. Don't give her power." Power. The word itself felt cursed. Then one day, I got a call from the sheriff's department. "We just thought you should know, Marcia's been released. Court-mandated outpatient treatment. Supervised." I felt my stomach tighten. "She's back here. She's renting a small property near County Line Road. Supposedly keeping to herself. If she contacts you again, let us know." That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside, every hum, every creak, set my nerves on edge. 3 nights later, around 10:45, I stepped outside to lock the gate and noticed something odd. One of my security lights was out. Not burned out, unscrewed. I replaced the bulb, double-checked the cameras, and went back inside. But when I reviewed the footage, the feed glitched during the exact 5-minute window the light went dark. Static. Black screen. Someone had learned from the last time. The next day, I drove to the edge of the neighborhood, the place where she was supposedly staying. The small rental sat behind an overgrown fence, an old shed in back and tarps covering something bulky in the yard. I didn't get out of the truck, but I didn't have to. The moment I saw the faint shimmer of solar glass beneath the tarp, I knew. She was building again. I told myself to leave it to the police, to the inspectors, to anyone but me. But that night, I couldn't stop picturing those panels glowing under the tarp, feeding something reckless. Erin caught me staring out the window at midnight. "You're obsessing," she said softly. "I'm preparing," I replied. "You don't understand, she's not done." "And if she's not? What then?" "Then I'll end it." The words came out before I could stop them. The next morning, I installed a new sensor array, motion, heat, magnetic detection, all feeding directly to my phone. If anyone even looked at my equipment wrong, I'd know. 3 quiet days passed. Then, early Saturday, I got a ping. "Motion detected. East perimeter." I threw on shoes and grabbed the flashlight. The backyard was still. No movement. But the grass near the fence, freshly pressed, 2 parallel lines like someone had dragged a cable or pipe across it. My stomach dropped. I followed the tracks to the corner where my property met the greenbelt. The line vanished under a tangle of weeds. I knelt, brushed them aside, and there it was, a thin black conduit snaking underground toward the road. I dug down with my hands until I found the junction. Inside was a small transmitter, solar-powered, signal light blinking faintly. A tracker. I yanked it out, disconnected the battery, and took it straight to the police. The officer on duty sighed when he saw it. "We'll add it to the report," he said, tone-weary. "But unless we catch her in the act, there's not much else. She's trespassing, stalking, tampering with private property. How is that not enough? Cole, we're doing what we can. You've got a restraining order. She's already been flagged for violation once. Just keep documenting. Documenting. Always documenting." I left the station angrier than I'd ever been. That night, I made a decision. If the system couldn't protect me, I'd protect myself. I set up a decoy junction box, wired but inactive, glowing like a real control hub. Inside, a motion-triggered tracker camera and a silent alarm connected to my phone. If she touched it, I'd know instantly. Erin hated it. "You're baiting her," she said. "I'm proving what she's doing," I replied. "You're feeding the same obsession you accuse her of." I didn't answer because she wasn't wrong. But I couldn't stop. Not anymore. At 2:17 a.m., the alarm went off. I bolted outside, heart pounding, phone feed flashing red. The image showed a figure crouched at the decoy box, face half-shadowed, hands prying the panel open. The motion light snapped on, and for a split second I saw her clearly. Marcia. She froze like a trapped animal, eyes wide, hair wild in the cold wind. Then she ran, darting through the yard, vaulting the fence like she'd rehearsed it. By the time the deputies arrived, she was gone again. They searched her rental the next morning. Empty. She'd vanished. The landlord said she'd packed overnight and left no forwarding address. But she'd left one thing behind. Inside the shed, stacked neatly in rows, were batteries. Dozens of them. Wired in series, humming faintly. A makeshift grid. And at the center, a cracked laptop, still open, showing a dashboard filled with live data feeds. Coordinates, timestamps, voltage readings. Every single feed was tagged with my system ID. She'd been monitoring me for weeks, watching my power flow like it was hers. The authorities confiscated everything. I gave another statement. They promised again to keep me informed. But I knew the truth. I wasn't dealing with a criminal anymore. I was dealing with a ghost who refused to stop haunting me. That night, as the wind rattled the windows, Erin said quietly, "Maybe she's gone for good this time." "I've thought that before," I said. And then, like some cruel confirmation, the lights flickered. Once, twice. The panels were fine. The batteries steady. Yet my system log showed a single data ping, an external handshake request, originating from an untraceable IP. The signature ID? Harrison_. My breath caught. Erin saw the look on my face. "What is it?" "She found a way in again," I whispered. "Cole." But the lights flickered again before she could finish. Then everything went dark. When they came back on 3 seconds later, the control panel on my phone showed a message. Not from the manufacturer, not from the grid, but typed into my system's internal terminal. Did you really think power is something you can own? I stood there, staring at it, heart pounding in the silence that followed. It wasn't just her anymore, it was everything she'd built, all the obsession, all the wires still out there in the ether. She didn't need to be next door to haunt me. And as the hum of the batteries slowly returned, I found myself asking questions that scared me more than her presence ever had. What if she'd become something the grid itself couldn't erase? What if every spark of power that flowed through this neighborhood carried a trace of her madness? And what happens when the person who wanted control over everything finally merges with the one thing no one can control, energy itself? Because as I stood there in the half-light, one truth hit me harder than all the others. She might be gone from sight, but she'd already found her way into the system. And if the system never sleeps, neither will she. It's strange how silence can feel loud when you know someone, or something, is listening. After that night, I started to hear the hum again. Not the usual comforting buzz of solar converters and steady current, but something erratic, like the system was whispering in a language I couldn't decode. Erin said it was just paranoia. You've been living in crisis mode for months, she told me. You're hearing ghosts in the wires. Maybe she was right. But deep down, I knew the difference between paranoia and pattern. The pattern was there. Every night around 2 a.m., the voltage on my system would dip by exactly 3%. Then, a single second later, it would spike to compensate. That kind of fluctuation doesn't just happen. It's deliberate, like someone was knocking on the grid. The first few nights, I logged it, trying to find a source. No devices, no local interference, no storms. The signal seemed to originate from nowhere and everywhere at once, like a phantom handshake bouncing between routers, relays, maybe even smart meters. I'd unplug one system, and it would reappear through another. It felt like she'd found a way to live inside the current itself. I couldn't say that out loud, of course. The sheriff had stopped returning my calls weeks ago, and the Energy Board had closed the case after insufficient evidence of continuing harassment. According to the world, Marcia was gone. But the grid disagreed. One night, I sat in the dark office with the only light coming from my laptop screen, the system dashboard glowing faintly blue. I watched the current ripple across my panels, steady until the clock struck 2 o'clock. Then, there it was. The dip. The pulse. The spike. This time, though, something changed. A text field appeared in the control console, the same one that had displayed her message before. Still think the light belongs to you? My pulse quickened. I typed back before I could think. Who are you? The reply came instantly. You know who I am. Erin found me staring at the screen minutes later, pale, frozen. She grabbed my shoulders. Cole, look at me. It's not her. It's some hacker, okay? Someone copying her. Then why does it use my system ID? I asked quietly. She didn't have an answer. That night, I disconnected from the internet entirely. No Wi-Fi, no network bridges. Just local storage and isolated monitoring. But at exactly 2 a.m., the same surge hit. The same words appeared. That's when I realized it wasn't coming through the network. It was coming through the power. The thought chilled me to the bone. In desperation, I reached out to Grant. If anyone could make sense of this, it was the retired engineer who'd helped half the town set up their panels before the HOA crackdown. When I explained what was happening, he didn't laugh. He just frowned, deep and thoughtful. Solar systems can't talk, Cole, he said finally, but someone could have left behind a control subroutine. If she ever accessed your firmware, she might have embedded a trigger, something that pings through voltage modulation. You're saying this could be a program signal? He nodded slowly. A kind of digital haunting. He agreed to come over the next morning to run diagnostic. But he never made it. At sunrise, his wife called me in tears. He'd collapsed in his workshop overnight. Heart failure. Instant. Natural causes, they said. But the timing, just hours after I'd asked him to help, made my skin crawl. That afternoon, I walked through my house in complete silence. Every light off, every appliance unplugged. Erin tried to stay calm for both of us, but I could see the strain in her eyes. "Please, Cole," she whispered, "let this go. Whatever's left of her, real or digital, it only exists because you keep fighting it. But how do you ignore a war that keeps coming to your doorstep?" The next night, the signal returned, stronger than before. The panels pulsed like they were breathing. And this time, the message wasn't text. It was sound. A faint, rhythmic buzz came through the inverter speaker, a pattern of tones. 3 short, 1 long, 2 short. I recorded it, ran it through a spectrum analyzer, and nearly dropped my laptop. The waveform wasn't random. It spelled out letters. MRSHA. That was the moment I realized she wasn't trying to scare me. She was communicating. I stayed up all night decoding patterns, tracing signals, cross-referencing frequencies. Each cycle spelled a fragment of words. Return, current, balance, light, harmony. Words she'd used in her old speeches. Words that had once sounded delusional but now felt chillingly coherent. The next evening, Erin had had enough. She packed an overnight bag. "I'm going to my sister's," she said softly. "You need sleep, Cole. You need distance." "I can't leave now," I said. "It's building towards something." She looked at me the way people look at someone on the edge. "Then I hope whatever you're building toward is worth it." When she left, the house felt hollow, like even the air had stopped trusting me. At 2 a.m. sharp, the surge hit again, but this time, the lights didn't flicker. They flared. The entire room bathed in white, searing and steady. Every monitor, every bulb, every display burst to life simultaneously, feeding off an unseen current. And then I heard her voice. Not from speakers, not from any device, but through the vibration of the air itself, like static forming syllables. "Cole." I froze. "You're not real," I whispered. The air crackled. "You took my light. You took your own." "No," the voice said, sharp and intimate. "I became it." The lights dimmed again, pulsing with her words. "You thought control meant isolation. You thought cutting wires made you safe. But power isn't owned, it flows. It always finds connection." My throat went dry. "What do you want?" "Balance," she said softly. "You and we're opposite currents. I built the circuit. You completed it." Then the lights died completely. I stood in the pitch dark, trembling. For a moment, the silence was absolute. Then, one by one, the systems rebooted, every screen flashing a single message. Grid rebalance initiated. Outside, a low hum rose across the neighborhood. Windows lit up, one after another, until the entire cul-de-sac glowed like daylight. I ran outside. The air was heavy, vibrating with unseen charge. My neighbors' panels, all of them, had activated simultaneously, even those that had been offline for months. And every single one was syncing to my grid. The air shimmered with heat. I grabbed the emergency cutoff lever and pulled, but nothing happened. The failsafe was overridden. Then, through the chorus of buzzing power, I heard a sound I'll never forget, a laugh. Quiet, distorted, undeniably hers. "You built walls around light," it said. "I built bridges." Lightning cracked across the sky, splitting it open. The transformers blew in a chain reaction down the block. And then, everything went black. When I came to, it was dawn. The air smelled like metal and rain. The entire street was silent. No hum, no flicker, nothing. My panels were dead. The grid was down. Even cell service was gone. I stumbled inside. The system monitor was still on, running on internal battery. On the screen, a single line blinked in the corner. "Transfer complete." I stared at it for a long time, trying to understand what it meant. Then the faintest sound broke the silence, a distant whir, like something spinning far away. I followed it outside. Down the street, on the ridge beyond the subdivision, a single house still had power. I could see its lights glowing steady and warm through the morning haze. Marcia's old house. She wasn't living there. No one was. But the panels she'd once hidden behind her roofline were humming again. I watched from the road, unable to move. The lights in that house flickered 3 times, short, long, short, just like the pattern she used to send her name. Aaron returned 2 days later. The power company still hadn't explained the blackout. They said my system logs were corrupted by voltage feedback. The neighbors blamed freak weather. The HOA, what was left of it, stayed silent. But at night, sometimes, when the air is still and the stars are hidden behind the glow of the city, I can see the ridge from my window. And every so often those lights flicker again, short, long, short, like a heartbeat inside the dark. 3 questions keep me awake whenever it happens. What if she really did merge with the grid? If her mind, her obsession, her will found a way to survive in the current she worshipped? What if every spark of energy that powers this neighborhood still carries her signature, flowing endlessly from house to house, waiting for someone else to notice? And what if, when the lights finally go out again, it won't be a blackout, just her deciding it's time to speak once more? Because lately, when I close my eyes, I swear I can hear her whisper through the static. The power always comes back,